I'm back. You're back. We're all back. We're going to watch Corey Gerulis. I think that's how you pronounce it, Corey. I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm going to say it's Gerulis. We're going to watch him fly the Sportsman Known sequence for 2019 in his two-seat extra. Very fun to watch Corey fly. It's very smooth style. Corey, we need to tighten some things up. You need to be a little more aggressive in your flying, but you're off to a good start. I know you're fairly new at this. I saw you on Facebook showing a video and getting some comments. Good job. Keep posting videos. Ask for comments, grow. That's exactly the right idea, and I'm glad to help you out. So let's take a look at what you have going on in this Sportsman Known. First figure is a loop, and let's just go, in fact, right back to the very beginning because that is a little slow on the pole. And I know some people will say it looks fast, but it can be more brisk than that. And now we have the float. That's exactly the right idea. The float looks pretty good. And now the stick should come back a little quicker to the position we had at the beginning of the loop and then held there. And I see that the loop is actually slowing down. Okay, so when we do a loop, we have to pop the stick back because we have to do the most G at the bottom of the loop. And we go from 1G to whatever that G is, which is 5 Gs, let's say, at least. Maybe it's 4 in some airplanes, but usually 5 Gs is a good number. So we are flying along straight and level at 1G, and now we want to initiate the curve, the arc of the loop, and at that exact moment, we have to go from 1G to 5 Gs, like that. If we go from 1G to 5 Gs slowly, then the loop doesn't look round. We have a straight line that then becomes tight, and that's not what we want for a loop. So we have to go in right away from that 1G load to a 6G load or 5G load, whatever you've chosen. Could be 4 Gs, but let's say 5 Gs. You have to go to that immediately. The stick moves briskly back to establish that G, and then the stick is held there. As the loop occurs, the plane gets slower, and it all kind of works out pretty well if we just leave the stick where it was at the very beginning and simply dumbly hold it there until we get near the top of the loop, at which point we have to initiate what we call the float. The stick now moves to the float position. It's not briskly anymore because we use up some of the arc, and that takes time. But the stick moves from the initial position to the float position gently and stays there until we're over the top of the loop. And there's no finessing needed. It just simply again, moves and dumbly kind of stays in that exact same spot during the float. It doesn't have to be, there's not as much thought required to do this correctly as people usually think. So once we do that, we leave it there until it's time for the float to end. And now once the float ends, the stick again moves back to that original position and is held there. Okay, now I covered this before in other videos, but the reason I brought it up again here is because you're doing great all the way through the loop until the end. And now the plane, you brought the stick back and the stick is held there. It should not be finessed anymore. We do not tighten the stick as we get to the bottom because that would make a loop that looks like this. And we do not loosen the stick or relax the stick as we get to the bottom because that would make a bottom half of the loop that drags out and doesn't close the way a circle would close. The whole idea is to make a circle, and mathematically that just means we have to have that maximum G going from 1, briskly moving from 1 to the maximum G like a switch was thrown, and at the other side of the loop it has to again go from the maximum G back to 1. Pow. That's just mathematically what's required for a loop. Very common thing that people struggle with, and I see that in your flying at the end of this loop. I just see that it gets slower, like you're anticipating the line is coming up, and you're imagining it, and you're making sure you meet the line, but that's slowing it down, and that doesn't make a round figure anymore. You have a little bump there. I think that's just a pocket of air that you hit. Probably your own. You probably hit your own wash. Okay, now the next figure in this sequence, figure 2, is a hammerhead. And let's watch the pole because again, we're going from a straight line at 1G to an arc, and all these moves have to be brisk. And then when we get to the vertical position, we must again briskly arrest that curve and stop at a vertical line. It doesn't work to go gentle because the line then extends. And what we've done now is first of all, we've gotten a deduction from the judges because we aren't showing them a constant radius. And second of all, we've eaten up time that we could be spending in a nice, beautiful vertical line and doing things like vertical rolls or whatever else is required on that line. Now, you're flying Sportsman. There are no vertical rolls going on. I understand that. But that's still what the purpose of a vertical line is. So I want to make sure you're getting to that vertical line and then locking it in. And what I see here just now is you get near the vertical, still positive, and then clean it up. And that's a deduction, at least. It's a significant deduction. And it's also just not to your advantage. We want to get you to keep that going and then stop it. And the more you practice that, the easier it is. So it's normal for that to feel like, well, I can't do that yet. I will miss it. I'll go over or under. And there's always a temptation for people to say, well, I'll just get to that line gently, just a little bit gently, and then as I get better, I'll make it that transition less and less gentle, right? But I'm going to tell you, it's much better to make the transitions very crisp all the time and simply mess up and miss the mark. That's better because you'll then at least get closer and closer and closer every time, and eventually, I promise you'll get to where you can hit that line. You don't cheat yourself. Don't try and soften up to make something better. Always fail so that you get a 0 instead of a 10. Never fail so you get a 7 instead of a 7.5. It's just better to risk everything in this sport. And like a lot of sports, you just have to go with gusto and trust in yourself. All right, so watch this vertical. Let's pull to vertical again. And as you can see, right there, the pull softens up. You're now very positive, and then finally we get to vertical. I can almost imagine you kind of squinting at the sight as you're getting there, like, almost doesn't. When you're within a few degrees, it doesn't matter anymore. You just leave it. You pull and stop and leave it there, and don't worry so much about trying to figure out exactly what vertical is. Okay, let's watch the hammerhead itself. That looks pretty good. Hard to tell. You might be a little too fast. You might be able to wait a little longer, and now you clean up the line on the way down. So you'll get used to this, but when you do the hammerhead, just do the hammerhead, and you can look out there to make sure you're vertical. But generally speaking, you'll feel it because you watch the horizon, you can watch the nose swing through, and you can now tell if you went positive or negative on the line. You don't usually have to look out the side window, though I do recommend that if you're having trouble with that. Okay, now we're going to pull to level, and same thing here. That pull has to continue and then pop. Now that's better, but if I see it correct, the horizon comes up and just goes zoop and snaps there. It doesn't get gently into view and then gently stop itself. Okay. Next up is the Immelman, which is a half loop up and a half roll. Figure 3. So same thing here. We need a brisk pull. And in an Immelman, we do not float. So I see you floating like you do with a loop. We do not float with Immelmans. It isn't necessary. It doesn't help our scores. What we want is a lot of speed going into an Immelman so that no matter what the wind's doing, we just simply pull and dumbly hold onto the stick and we'll get a nice half loop. If we start slowing down and there's a lot of wind, then what happens is if you're going downwind at the beginning, you're going upwind and out at the top. Instead of moving forward, you kind of do one of these things. It doesn't look like a half loop anymore. And going downwind, the same problem. It starts stretching out, right? No longer looks like a half loop. So instead what we want to do is get them over with. We want to have lots of speed into them. We want to pop the stick back and hold it and carve and stop. That's the right technique for a half loop up because it's very hard to adjust the radius to make it constant. And the judges can really see, whereas in a regular loop, it's not as easy to see. It takes so much time. In a half loop up, it's very apparent when you start to slide off to the side to one direction. Okay, now we should have a half roll. So again, very soft up here. Half roll looks good. You stop the roll a little early. That's okay. Now, good. We should be pushing down to a 45. Okay, on the push. So it's another case where we need to be brisk. All of our radii need to be constant. And as you push down, you're getting faster and faster. And the radius won't be constant. If you push at a constant negative g or a constant rate, then you will not be a constant radius. You must actually increase the amount of push as you get closer to the 45 because you're going faster and faster. That's the math of it. So let's watch this here. It looks, in Sportsman, it's pretty common for it to be gentle because people aren't used to pushing, but you're getting more and more gentle as you get near the 45. We actually have to push harder. Now pulling to inverted, it's a 5/8 loop. This looks pretty good. Again, soft at the top because you're floating. Don't float. Half roll. Again, you kind of came up a little short in the roll. Make sure you're getting the roll finished. And now we have a 180-degree competition turn, which we should roll and then count. Okay, so you're rolling and pulling almost immediately. Roll and pull. There's a little bit of blending at the very end. We must roll, fly, and then pull. That's the correct technique. Roll, fly, and then pull. We do not roll and pull at the same time. That's a deduction. They may not be blended. Do not blend the roll and the pull. I tell people to count 1 potato, 2 potato. Sometimes I tell them to count a dirty word instead of potato because it helps them remember. But whatever, make sure you hold that. And you have to do that again at the end of the turn. You must hold that and then roll out. And I usually tell people 70 degrees is a good bank angle. 60 is the minimum. So 70 is a better angle for the turn. Okay, and you should continue the turn until you're on the heading you chose, which would be at 180 degrees, and then roll out. Okay, interesting on the roll. So on the roll, I can see a little bit of yaw happening as you're doing the roll out, and I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but maybe we need some roll drills to help with that, because it should be only roll that I see. You should pull, stop, and then roll. Okay? And really it's better if the rolls are full deflection, which will be simply popping over and back in the extra. We don't want to do the gentle roll. This just gives the judges more time to find mistakes, and it just doesn't look as good. And it consumes space in the box. And you need to focus on that too. We got to make sure everything fits in the box. Of course, I assume you're going to be competing. I see your sequence card. I see what you're flying. But if you're somebody who's just having fun, then you don't need to worry about the box, I guess. But you should start thinking about it. Okay, now we have a roll. Wait a minute. Should be a roll in the sequence, unless I have the wrong. Hold on a minute. 2019 Sportsman Known has a roll. So let's see here. Okay, so you did miss the roll in this sequence. Don't forget that figure 6 is a roll. Figure 7 is the split S, which is a half roll, half loop down. So I'm going to watch that now. And I see now that you probably have flown the sequence a couple times in this flight, but I'm only gonna critique the first flight. So if you do the roll correctly later, I understand. Okay, it looks pretty good. It doesn't look like you rolled all the way back to. It doesn't look like you had a 180 degree roll. It looks like you came up a little short in the roll. Like I don't think the horizon is lined up with the wings, but it's hard to tell because your head's probably cocked over to one side. Don't know. Make sure, by the way, always make sure you're in your seat. Think about being in your seat with the straps even around your body. It's very easy to get a strap off to one side because the parachute strap is here. Make sure you always have your seatbelt centered. Make sure your body's centered. Think about your posture when you get in the airplane. Think about where the stick is. It's possible, it looks like you have a tendency to kind of lean over with your body while you're flying. That will affect your flying. That will change how you fly. So think about that. Okay. Half loop down. Looks like a little bit of roll in that half loop down. So I think you weren't quite rolled all the way through. That's okay. We'll move on. Figure 8 is a wedge. Pull vertical, pull 45 down, half roll. Good. And that was a better pull and a little soft again on the stop, and you're positive, but not so bad. And now this is good, but we want to increase the rate of rotation on the pull towards the 45. You're slowing it down, so you're drawing a line. You can't tell from the cockpit. You cannot, unfortunately. One of the things about this sport is in the cockpit, the world is just sort of moving around you until you get pretty low to the ground, which I'm not recommending, but until you get low to the ground, and then it changes dramatically, and you get expansion, and you have a ground rush. At these altitudes, at normal competition altitudes, the world is just sort of revolving around you, and it doesn't really change very much, and it's hard to tell how you're moving in relation to the ground, right? But so it's very easy to do things that don't look like you expect. You think they look a certain way, and they just don't. It happens all the time. Almost everyone who shows up for their first competition in Sportsman is sure they're flying the sequence really, really well, and it looks beautiful. And it's very common to have to tell somebody, well, you have the right ideas, but you have to take less time on this part and more time on this part. You must pull more briskly here. You must soften more here. It's the fun of the sport, is settling all that and figuring all that out. So you're not alone in that at all. But in this case, you're on the vertical line. A little positive is okay. I got to use my airplane here. You're a little positive, not quite vertical. And then you have to pull. And now as you pull, you must pop the nose and hit that rate of rotation. And then it must increase as you get to 45. If you keep at the same rate or slow it down, then as you're getting near that 45 and you're descending and getting faster and faster, it no longer looks like it's a constant radius at all. And that's what I'm seeing there. And now we have the half roll, which I'm going to go back to make sure I get a chance to look at that. So here is the pull over the top, and now we should be increasing the rate dramatically. And now we are on our 45. That's good. Looks pretty good. I like it. I don't see the nose moving much in relation to the horizon. I believe you're holding the 45 really well. I like that. Okay. Figure 9, pull vertical. Still positive on this line as well. It's a touch. It's hard to tell, but I believe you're positive. And now pulling over the top. Oh, okay. And this is a case where we absolutely have to increase the rate of that the amount of that pull over the top for the same reasons. Pop, and then you have a very soft pull, and then over the top it must be a very brisk pull. Otherwise, as you get faster and faster, you've now drawn 300 feet of a line with the plane not vertical where it was supposed to be, because it must match. As you get to this point, you must arrive at that point vertically down, or you'll have a deduction. And it's a large deduction. All right, so that's your Humpty. Soft on this pull as well. Yeah, very soft. And now, and by the way, when I say soft, it's not necessarily about how much G you get to. You can do a pull that looks like that that's still 5 or 6 Gs, but it doesn't have the briskness that it needs. It's not the onset of it isn't quick enough, so that it's not about being manly or anything like that. It's more about making a decision that now we are pulling and now we are stopping the pull. I tell people G's on, G's off. We put the G's on and we take them off like it's a switch. G's on, G's off. Okay. Now we're pulling over the top for, this is a half cubit, so we're going to pull to 45 down. Look a little shallow maybe. Half roll looks good. And pull. Okay, great. And now we should be wagging, and then I see there's, yeah, okay, so there's several minutes of the video left. I won't go through and critique every flight that you made, but obviously you have several flights in one video, which is great. Good job. Looks really good. You're coming along very well. I remember seeing something you posted on Facebook. I can't remember, but it was a video, and oh no, you sent me a video earlier. I didn't get a chance to critique it, but I remember now that I saw one of your flights before. Okay, themes. Well, the biggest theme I've already told you, which is to work on your pulls, to trust yourself, to pull with intent and with vigor, and briskly, whatever word you want to use, and hold on to that pull until it's time to stop the pull, initiate it, take it off again, G's on, G's off. That's, I think, the number one thing. The 180-degree turn could be better. That needs to be separated so the roll and the pitch are not together, and you'll find that's much harder to do than it is to blend it. Separating it is much harder. That's why they make you separate it. So do not cheat yourself. Do not rush it. Go the opposite. Hold that roll angle for an uncomfortably long period of time, if that's what it takes to get your brain like cemented on how I do that correctly, and just go over the top of it, and then figure out what looks the best later. But for now, exaggerate that. Miss the roll. That's okay. We miss things. It happens. Obviously, want to do that figure. And otherwise, I think you're doing really well. So just focus on your lines and angles like you do in Sportsman. Send me another video some other time. Corey, very good to work with you. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If not, let me know and I'll get it right next time. Thanks, everybody, for stopping by, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.